History and now enthusiasm. The Dow running higher after hitting a new record close, topping the previous settlement high set back on October 9th of 2007. There are some key differences between today and the Dow's previous peak, and here's some historical perspective. For example, the national debt was just over $9 trillion in 2007. Now it is $16.6 trillion. Gross domestic product grew at 5.1% in October of 2007. From the prior 4 quarters, GDP now stands at 2.2%. And the last time the Dow hit a record high, the unemployment rate was 4.7%. It is now 7.9%, of course. Median U.S. household income slid nearly 6% from its 2007 level of $54,623 to $51,584. So let's put this rally in perspective. With Fox Business's Market Statesman, it is time for Lou Dobbs Now.
Market Statesman.
You are a market statesman.
Everybody's picked up on that title for you. How do you feel about it?
I think
It's kinda nice.
I'm honored. I like it.
What do you think about the key differences? I mean, when you look at the economy, you look at our debt, you look at what we've spent.
Yeah. I think the key difference is, in fact, an economy that was healthy, that was moving forward. But what we didn't know, masked by all of those numbers that you've just cited, was that we were in the midst of the largest housing bubble. Right. A few people noted it and warned us as to what would happen. But that was a bubble. If you look at those numbers that you just went through, what in the world is this if not a bubble? Because we're looking at unemployment that is raging high. And it's interesting, excuse me, 4.7% unemployment rate then. And the Fed wants to get it down to just about 2 points above that.
Right.
And they will back off the quantitative
easing.
Victory. And declare victory, as you said. It's a peculiar time. But we're also seeing strong earnings on the other hand, as our friends, the economists, always say, on the other hand. Right. But this is a difficult peak to expect to persist.
Is it fair to suggest, Lou, that Main Street just is not celebrating this milestone in the Dow because of this disconnect you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons, certainly, Lori. And we're seeing some really pessimistic viewpoints come out of these polls where people are talking about they don't expect much in the way of economic growth or return to prosperity anytime soon. But there are also some big numbers here to consider. And we're talking about having recovered $11.3 trillion in wealth, in market cap over the course of time since October 9th of 2007. That's a big deal. You talk about a wealth effect. Inversely, a third of that, at least, is the Federal Reserve stimulating the economy. Its assets have grown wildly to $3 trillion. There'll be much more than that by the end of this year because we're in the midst of another bond purchase program that's adding just about $1 trillion to the financial system this year. That's
the biggest difference, I think, when we look at those stats, is that the Fed's balance sheet back at the last peak was under $1 trillion. It's now over $3 trillion. And a lot of people are now starting to ask the question, when unemployment does fall to 6.5% and they do begin to exit the market, what is the impact of that? Does everything collapse at that point? What bill are taxpayers left with? How does that even happen?
Well, the taxpayers, fortunately, won't be left with a bill as a result of Fed open market operations. But they will be left with an economy that is just surging with money supply. And as a result, I don't think we're likely to see the Fed get too worried about the effects. I think when you look at 6.5% unemployment, if we get to that point, we're going to see housing continue its rebound. And all of that money that has been absorbed is really having a stimulative effect. I'm staggered by the number of those in the mainstream media who are not drawing the correlation between the $85 billion a month in Fed stimulus and this, this wailing and gnashing of teeth, this phony nonsense by this administration, talking about $44 billion over the course of the remaining 7 months. It's silly.
It's amazing, but if they sell those assets for less than they bought it for, and this has been the conversation lately, why is that's a paper loss at the very least. Why is it's being batted about in academia and newspapers and
arguably, and this is what I think Bernanke would argue, in fact, that as we look at lower prices for those assets, we're also looking at higher tax receipts because presumably when they're moving into the market, they're going to be talking about a growing economy. The offsets are significant. And I think, by the way, Bernanke comes out on the positive side. I know that there are a bunch of people who, first of all, hate the Fed and they hate open market operations and they think we can just do all sorts of things differently.
Like
and
your
they may
guest
be
this
right.
evening, right? Or
But
at
the
least his
reality
father.
is the nonsense has got to stop around the Fed. Had the Fed not been into this economy, God knows where we would be, because the fiscal policy managers are completely out of, let me rephrase that, they are inadequate to the task.
Oh, finish your first statement.
And the monetary policy is in the hands of adults.
So funny you mentioned the Fed and the criticism against it, right? Because
Yeah.
the Paul family, as
Well, I'm going to, I
Tonight, you can see Lou Dobbs here every day at this time, but then even more spectacularly tonight, you can catch him with Senator Rand Paul.
like that. Degrees of
It is,
spectacularity.
it's degrees of fabulousness. Now, this is if he stops talking. I mean, I don't know. You have this booked on your show for later. I'm not entirely sure he's going to finish up and he
Nor are
could
we,
still
but
be talking.
that's part of the drama, part of the suspense
Yes.
that is Washington. And it's
television.
not just Obama drama these days. We've got a lot of drama in Washington.
hey, could you actually become part of the sequester? Could he answer your questions? I'm sorry, for the filibuster.
I would be honored
Wouldn't that be cool
to
if they
join
just
history in that way.
right?
would be
If they
great.
just fed it
I'm
into
not
the
quite sure
Senate
what
floor,
the rules are, but
you could just field your questions.
Oh, I
that
think-
would be history making.
That would be great. Lou Dobbs, thanks so much. So Ben is.
we're going to work on that.
We're gonna
Thank you
work on
very
that.